Hello and welcome to lecture number 5. We'll be continuing on from what we had started off in the previous lecture, in which we were looking at the interfacing between the subject of project stakeholder management and engagement and various other disciplines. And if you recall from the preceding lecture, we had talked about communications, we had talked about culture, we had talked about IT, we had talked about international relations, law, politics, psychology, sociology, and how they all closely interface with the subject of project stakeholder management and engagement. What we are going to be looking at in this lecture is the relationship between project stakeholder management engagement and the discipline of ethics. Ethics has a very, very strong relationship to project stakeholder management, and ideally every action or every interaction which takes place within the framework of project stakeholder management and engagement must be done on the basis of an ethical foundation. This is the minimum requirement, and in order for stakeholder management and engagement to properly work, we have to be always mindful of the role, the importance, and the cruciality of being ethical, acting ethically. So if we go now to this subject of ethics, ethics, you know, is a branch of philosophy which looks at and analyzes questions and issues concerning morality. And it provides insight and guidance which distinguishes so-called good conduct from bad conduct. It has high relevance for projects as well as stakeholder management and engagement practices, as I have just pointed out to you. So what we're doing is we're looking really at a philosophical branch. We're looking at the issue of morality, and we're looking at good conduct, good stakeholder management and engagement conduct, bad stakeholder management and engagement conduct. And ethics here is the line which lies between them. If it's ethical, it's good. If it's unethical, it's bad. And what we have to be cognizant of is what are the types of good conduct, what are the types of bad conduct. We'll be looking at it in this lecture. I should mention that ethics has been around for a very long time. It's not something which is just crept up in the last century or so. It's actually been around for thousands of years, and it has been highly debated. It's also now become highly evolved discipline. Lots and lots of books have been written about ethics, and actually it has even got several branches which will be beyond the scope of this course here. For example, meta-ethics, normative ethics, and situational ethics. On each of these areas, you know, you will find lots and lots of literature. So if you're interested, well, maybe that would be something you might like to look at. But what we want to do in this lecture is a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more practical, and that is what we'll be coming to shortly. Ethics is not only a very old subject, but it's also a subject which finds universal application in practically all scientific disciplines. Especially in the social sciences and in the management field. If you take academia, for instance, there's always a debate, you know, about ethical and unethical conduct, taking other people's ideas, you know, passing them off as your own, which is, you know, typically quoted as a very unethical conduct in academia, copy-pasting culture, you know, which I had already pointed out to you, which I don't want to see here in this course anywhere taking place or in any examination or assignment. Business, you know, how big organizations, corporate organizations, how they sometimes behave, how they should be behaving and how they actually behave. There's sometimes quite big disparities there. Unethical conduct by businesses. The media, if you look down here, the media, often we hear complaints about the media, how they manipulate opinions, you know, how they bring selective reporting, selective coverage, you know, trying to project one point of view as the right point of view, which may not necessarily be the right point of view. Question of media ethics, medical ethics, nowadays a big discussion about cloning, whether people should be cloned, how far cloning should go, stem cell research. A lot of people are opposed to that. Others, of course, are quite supportive of it. In old days, a lot of medical experiments used to be conducted, for example, on prisoners, which was highly unethical. These sorts of things. Politics, as we know, we don't have to say much about that. You just have to read the paper every day, or you just have to, talk to people concerned, and then the level of ethics which you find in politics. But what we are more concerned about is the application of ethics in programs and projects. You might have seen that I often use the word programs. The programs are actually sets of interrelated projects. So there is no clash between them, programs and projects. We would like to know how ethics are being applied in these areas, and there is not that much research currently available, actually. But programs and projects are really sort of extensions of like business, economics, management, public administration, development, and so forth. And the same basic rules which apply over there, they also apply to projects and programs. What are some of the forces which influence stakeholder ethics? Now we're talking about project stakeholders and their ethics. Project stakeholders, as you know, can be individuals, can be groups, can be associations, can be organizations, and so forth and so forth. What are the forces which influence their ethics? And there are many different forces, and each force can have a different intensity of impact on different stakeholders. If you look over here on the left side, religious scriptures, different religions of the world, they have their prescriptive normative content, what should be done, what should not be done, etc., etc. That can influence how the project stakeholders think and act. You have a lot of philosophers who have worked very hard on ethics, already going back thousands of years. So their work also has had an impact, or can have an impact on some project stakeholders who are influenced by them. We have got moral leaders, person we've been talking about a lot in the last 10-15 years has been Nelson Mandela and his approach to overcoming the apartheid system in South Africa, sort of a non-violent reconciliatory approach. Well, depends on how you look at it, but that is also a force, the force of moral leaders which affect stakeholders' perceptions of ethics. Law, of course, social environment in which one is operating, the workplace environment. I pointed out every organization has got a different culture, and from this culture also arise different configurations of what is considered ethically acceptable and maybe not so ethically acceptable. There's also the situational context. Whatever situation you find yourself in can be a very difficult situation you're finding yourself in, and then you have to decide how you will act in that situation. Sometimes it might not be very ethical, but the situation is such that there's no way around it. And then there's, of course, personal evolution, your own personal values, your own personal drives, and how you really see yourself in the world and your relationship to the world and the society in which you are embedded. So there are many different forces which are influencing ethics, from different directions, and some have got different intensities. Some may influence a lot, some may not influence that much, but these are all the forces which are affecting the ethical sort of makeup of a stakeholder. If you take a look at the project stakeholder community, and as I pointed out, the community can be very small, can be very large, very complex. Every project has got various activities, processes, tasks assigned to it. You have primary or secondary stakeholders, or if you want to use the term internal or external stakeholders, I'm using here the term internal and external stakeholders, which are basically synonymous with primary. Internal are synonymous with primary, external are synonymous with secondary stakeholders. If you look at this illustration over here, which I have prepared, you will see that there are different configurations. Ethics and law. Don't confuse the two. Ethics and law are two separate but interrelated things. Ethics is more concerned with the moral dimension. Law, of course, is concerned with the legal dimension. In most cases, they will overlap. They will be consistent with each other. There will, of course, be some cases where they are not consistent with each other. Sometimes ethical boundaries are transgressed. Transgressed means you are you're overstepping ethical boundaries. You are doing something which you should basically not be doing. Sometimes ethical boundaries are not transgressed, or ideal case they should never be transgressed, but practical world sometimes it's not possible. Then if you look at the legal boundaries, many times you will find the legal boundaries are transgressed, means there has been a violation of some law. Sometimes they are not transgressed. Hopefully they should never be transgressed. That means you're always within the framework of the law. So you have to distinguish here ethics and law, but you also have to be mindful of the fact that the two are very closely related to each other. And when you are talking about ethics and project stakeholder management, you also have to include the legal dimension. This little table I have prepared over here, which shows you the relationship between the ethical dimension, that is the moral dimension, and the law dimension, that is the legal dimension. Moral dimension is here, on the left side, these two boxes, ethical and unethical. The law dimension is here on the middle and on the right, that is legal acts and illegal acts. And what you can have on a project is you can have some actions which are ethical and which are at the same time legal. That is, in most cases, that would be the case. But you can also have sometimes situations where you have an action which is ethical, or it's not unethical, but which it may be illegal. At the same time, you can have actions which are unethical, but which may be legal. There's no law against them, even though they're unethical. And you may have, in the worst case scenario here, you have actions which are unethical and, of course, which are then also illegal. For example, blackmail, physical assaults, theft. These are not only unethical, but these are also illegal. An action which is, for example, legal but unethical would be, let's say, payment of the minimum wage. Payment of the minimum wage is legal. This is the minimum wage according to law. But if it's a project where you have very powerful financiers, who are very rich, who have lots and lots of resources, is it ethical for them to pay the minimum wage? Could they pay some more, for instance? So these are the kind of situations which may arise, these sort of borderline or peripheral actions and situations which one has to consider in the context of project stakeholder management. This illustration which I have prepared over here, it's a little bit more complex, but what I really am trying to do here is to try and get you thinking multi-dimensionally. We have, as I pointed out, internal stakeholders or primary stakeholders, and we have got external stakeholders or secondary stakeholders. Now, what are the actions which can take place here, especially with regards to unethical behavior? Well, there are different dimensions here. You have your internal stakeholders, and some of them may act unethically towards other internal stakeholders. That would be box or circle number A over here. This is the category of the internal stakeholders. And you have some internal stakeholders who are acting unethically towards other internal stakeholders. And we'll be coming to a lot of examples in a few minutes. This is just first to give you the conceptual background. Circle number B, this blue circle here on the right, that comes under the category of external or secondary stakeholders. Here you may have some external stakeholders who are acting unethically towards other external stakeholders. So stakeholders acting unethically within the same category, whether it's internal, whether it's internal. And then you have this cross-category dimension, C, at the top over here. C, internal stakeholders act unethically towards some or all external stakeholders. And the other, the reverse, D, this yellow circle over here, external stakeholders, some or all, may act unethically towards internal stakeholders. And then you have here a more complex case in E and F. Some internal stakeholders and external stakeholders act unethically towards other external stakeholders. And F, internal stakeholders and some external stakeholders act unethically towards other internal stakeholders. So unethical actions, they are not unidimensional, they can be multidimensional and cross-category. Some internal stakeholders are acting unethically towards other internal stakeholders. Some external stakeholders are acting unethically towards other external stakeholders. And some internal stakeholders may act unethically towards external holders, and vice versa. And then you may have groups of internal and external stakeholders who are acting unethically towards other internal and external stakeholders. So it's a little bit more complex, you know, if you want to go into it in a little bit more detail. And ethics is, you know, it's a big issue on projects. You hear about it all the time. You read about it all the time. Often you read about procurement, sort of inconsistencies, where tenders are being awarded maybe to those who have submitted higher sort of costs rather than those who have asked to be given less cost for their tender. Because of some hanky-panky which is going on in between, which in many cases that is an example of not only an unethical action, but it would be also illegal. What are the areas in which unethical actions by stakeholders take place? For example, by primary or internal stakeholders to the disadvantage of all other stakeholders? Well, there are a lot of areas where unethical acts can take place. For example, human resources, in the behavioral sphere, the way stakeholders behave to other stakeholders. As I just pointed out, procurement and contracting. Often there is a lot of unethical actions taking place over there. Costing and scheduling, for example, intentionally misestimating costs and schedules. Communications, for example, you know, withholding information. Quality, you know, for instance, not really keeping up the desired quality standards which have been assured. Safety and security, such as, you know, not ensuring that there's proper safety and security at a project site. Acknowledgements, not acknowledging people's contributions or ideas. Professional standards, for example, not holding up to them, promising to hold up to them, but not really holding up to them. And of course, all kinds of miscellaneous external considerations. It's very difficult to prevent unethical actions happening on projects, but of course, when one knows that there is a potential for unethical actions, then one can at least try and do something about them in a preventative framework. Projects offer a huge scope of opportunities for unethical acts, whether these are internal or external to the project. Larger, more complex and longer-term projects tend to offer more opportunities for unethical conduct than smaller, simpler, shorter duration projects. It makes sense, you know, the longer the time frame, the more stakeholders are involved, the more interfacing points are there, the more complex the project, the more numerous the inputs and so forth, then of course there is more potential for unethical actions. And it's next to impossible to prevent unethical conduct or actions from occurring on projects. However, the likelihood of these occurrences can be reduced by many measures, including monitoring, sanctioning, and training, educating, telling people what are unethical things, what they can do, what they should not do on a project, for instance. And of course having a good, effective monitoring mechanism which can see, all what is taking place, and if there are any unethical actions taking place, immediately to intervene and sanction and do something about these unethical actions. Some specific examples here now. In the human resources context, for instance, if you look now at the management of projects, by the project management level, could be sponsor, senior manager, steering committee, and so forth, those who are managing projects. Some of their unethical actions could include, for example, favoritism and nepotism. Who they prefer on their projects. Hiring someone who might not be the best qualified person, but who somehow is related maybe, or someone who knows them. That could be unethical. Discrimination in hiring and promotions. Again, this is another form of favoritism, when you tend to prefer some people for promotions over others, even though those who are getting promoted might not necessarily have deserved that promotion. Unfair performance appraisals can be a big problem, when people's contributions really have not been sort of properly assessed, and there is no sort of recognition for that. Paying the minimum wage, this was the example I pointed out. If you have a very resource-rich project sponsor, financer, paying the minimum wage, it's not illegal, but it raises the question whether it's really ethical, whether one could add to that and give a higher compensation level. Inadequate incentives and rewards. This is very important in human resource management, that there should be a proper system of incentive and rewards, and there are all types of incentives, monetary and non-monetary. But if these incentives and rewards are inadequate, then it is also unethical, really, because you are not really sort of showing your appreciation or compensating your stakeholders for the contributions they have made in pursuit of the project. Playing politics, of course, that's very unethical, to play politics rather than focusing on the tasks which have to be done. Overloading employees with work, that is a big problem, when you can sometimes feel overloaded. I sometimes do, and certainly it's not an ethical way of doing things, when some employees are underburdened and some are overburdened. Withholding salary and benefits. Reneging on promises and assurances, that means not keeping promises and assurances. Telling your human resources, for instance, that yes, they will be provided a better sort of facility, or they will be provided more provisions to do the work easier, and not keeping them. That's unethical. Taking credit for other people's ideas, of course. Tolerating a bad work environment, and there are many ways in which you can look at a bad work environment, many ways you can define it. It's quite subjective, really, but if you have a bad work environment which you can improve and you don't, that's very unethical. Ignoring legitimate grievances, inadequate counseling and mentoring, discourteousness, impoliteness, rudeness. You can see this gentleman here on the slide. These are all typical examples of unethical behavior, unethical actions, and none of these really, or in most cases, would be illegal. There's no specific laws would be against most of them, but as you can see, they are not desirable behavior. It's not ethical to do them, and they should not be done. There are many other examples which I have brought here. Again, taking the human resource context of project, if you now look at it from the employee angle, they also can be conducting very unethical behavior at times. For example, absenteeism from work. There's nothing wrong with you, you're not ill, nothing is wrong, but you still stay away from work because you don't feel like going to work. That's unethical. Also playing politics, free riding, not doing their required contribution, but taking credit and taking benefit from the work of others. Lacking team spirit, not giving the best efforts, being uncooperative and discourteous, ignoring the prescribed standards, processes, procedures, lying and backbiting, harassing and inciting colleagues, stealing ideas, withholding important information, leaking information to those who might be against the project so that they could use it against the project, manipulating and intentionally misleading people, misusing project resources, like for their own personal use. A project vehicle could be used for their own personal or family use, and failing to prevent avoidable losses. If they know that something can be done to save cost on the project or to save unnecessary costs, and they're not doing anything about it, that too is certainly very unethical conduct. And all these things which you find in an everyday work environment, you will also be finding in every project environment to some extent or the other. Again, also depends on the culture of the project environment. We had talked about culture, preceding class, and I had mentioned out that projects also have their culture and their subcultures. And there might be some cultures which are very strongly opposed to this and which are trying to prevent this, and there may be other cultures which are more sort of open to such acts, which do not sanction them. So these are examples from which you will typically find also on projects, in addition to any other routine operational work environment. And I had also prepared some more examples over here just to point out to you. Now looking at a more internal, external context. Previously we were talking about human resources that was within the primary stakeholder environment, within the internal stakeholder environment. Now we are looking at sort of between internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, those which are directly involved in the project and those which are indirectly or directly affected by it outside the project. There can be also many examples of unethical behavior. For example, callous, uncaring or dismissive attitude. You don't really bother what your external stakeholders think or say, couldn't care less. We do the project, it's not our problem, let them live with it. That is not an ethical approach, and it's not good stakeholder management and engagement. No communication strategy or plan. Later on in this course we'll perhaps look at some samples of communication strategies or plans. As I pointed out, communication is the basis of all interaction between stakeholders. And if you have no communication strategy or plan, well, what you're essentially saying or doing is that you are not really giving specific thought to providing information to stakeholders, or sort of keeping them informed, or sort of putting your point of view across, or trying to listen to their point of view, which is also not an ethical thing to do. Lack or inadequate consultation, or inadequate incentives for stakeholders. And the incentives come in many forms also for external stakeholders, which we'll look at when we're talking about stakeholder engagement. Understating the project's negative impacts. When you say, for example, building a dam, and you say, well, there will be very little displacement of people, very little resettlement is required, maybe about 5,000 people, and then it turns out to be maybe 40 or 50,000, 10 times the amount, which you have first understated, to make it more acceptable. or overstating the project's positive impacts. The project will bring such and such and such benefits. Later on, one finds out that the project has not even brought 1/3 of those benefits. So the benefits, the anticipated benefits, were clearly overstated, often intentionally. That's unethical. Withholding important information from stakeholders is also unethical because they cannot act upon that information. Misleading stakeholders, not showing any interest in their inputs or in their ideas, ignoring potential hazards, for example, environmental hazards, chemical hazards, traffic hazards, refusal to compensate for losses. You know, if a stakeholder has lost business because of some road construction project, the customers who normally buy from shops, they can't access those shops because it's all barriers have been put up, or there are sort of bricks are lying around, or cement is lying around, whatever, and there is no compensation for that. That is unethical. Delay in provision of compensation, you know, that is also unethical. There's the saying in law, justice delayed is justice denied. Well, in the context of stakeholder ethics, delay in provision of compensation is also a bad thing. No jobs or business for stakeholders. Good stakeholder management, good stakeholder engagement requires that if you are doing a project in a certain locality in which the people of that locality would be negatively affected, then one should try and at least source jobs and businesses within that locality as a kind of a compensation. And if that is not done, then it is not fair to those stakeholders, because they are incurring potential losses as a result of the project, but they're not incurring any direct benefits in terms of jobs and businesses, economic and financial benefits. No CSR program, corporate social responsibility program. Many times, you know, big organizations, they are conducting big projects which can be very disruptive to the local life, to the local environment, and CSR, corporate social responsibility, means that there should be some kind of a compensation scheme. For example, if a company is doing development work in a certain area, drilling for oil, drilling for gas, then they should provide some kind of facilities to the local community, maybe some health clinic, or maybe some elementary school, or maybe some drinking water sanitation systems and drinking water systems, etc. This is considered now to be sort of the correct thing to do. And if organizations who are doing projects do not have this in place, for the people who are affected, for the stakeholders who are affected by their projects, that is not ethical of them to do so. So there are, as you can see, tons and tons of examples. I've also brought here a few more, you know, just to round it off. Seeking unjustified compensation. For example, if an external stakeholder comes and says, well, you know, I have suffered a lot because of your project. My health has suffered, my mental health has suffered, or my business has suffered, and now I want to have this huge amount of compensation, which might be totally unjustified. Or, for example, asking for immoral favors. Yes, okay, we will support you, but then you have to sort of, you know, do something for us which really is totally unjustified, or which is should not be asked for. And of course, there are other things like passing information to project adversaries, those who are against the project. If you're working for a project and you are secretly passing on information to those who are working against the project, that is very unethical. For example, if you're working on a new product development project, which your company is trying to keep secret, and you are informing the competitors that yes, we are working on such and such project, we are developing such and such product with such and such specifications, etc., 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 that is highly unethical, and so forth. So this is just a few examples. So you can see that there are many opportunities for unethical conduct on projects. And as I said, you cannot really eliminate unethical conduct. It will always be there in some form or the other, sometimes very bad, sometimes not so bad. Or what you can do is you can try and come up with some kind of preventative systems to minimize or to mitigate this possibility of unethical conduct occurring and the consequences of unethical conduct if and when they do occur. Now, talk about ethics. It all sounds very nice, that we have to be ethical. We have, of course, never to transgress ethical boundaries. We must never transgress legal boundaries. And of course, this is how it is in theory. But as you know, theory and practice are not always in sync with each other. And sometimes, in practice, you are put in a situation where you really have to decide, whether you can follow your ethical standards to the maximum possible impact, or maybe you might have to compromise them a little bit, because if you don't, it might have adverse consequential effect for the project. And of course, if the project is adversely affected, it will have an adverse effect for all the project stakeholders who are somehow closely tied into that project. For instance, if you have a case where, let us say, you are applying for a permit from a local government agency for your project or part of your project, some activity which has to be done on your project, and you will require a permit, and you go to the local government agency, and the local agency says, yes, we will give you the permit, but it will take maybe 3 months. And 3 months, of course, is quite a long time, in the project life. And you don't want to wait for 3 months, sitting idly by with no work being done. And you say, well, we would like to expedite it. How can it be expedited? And you're told, well, okay, yes, it can be expedited, but, you have to pay a little bit for it, there is a little cost, sort of under the table cost, which is associated with that, So, ethically speaking, you should not pay that, because it's not something which is prescribed according to procedure, but it is something which is taken under the table. On the other hand, if you don't pay that, your project will be delayed. And it could be then that in 3 months or so, you might find out that the situations have changed so much that maybe the project might not really even be necessary now, or maybe priorities have changed, and the people who are supposed to be doing your project, they will not be available. They'll be doing some other project. Question is what to do. Should you just sit tight and wait the 3 months, or should you pay under the hand? Probably most project implementers here, what they would do is they would pay under the hand, even though they know it is not a really ethical thing to do so. This is just a very simple example, but it's not an uncommon example. It happens all the time in projects, wherever you are, whatever place you are. And some places are much worse than others, as we know. So this is the purist versus pragmatist position. Pragmatist, from pragmatic, practical, one has to look at the situation, the practical situation, and one has to then really sort of decide how to proceed then accordingly. Because if you sometimes stick to your if you stick to your ethical position and don't care about the practical situation, what you could end up doing is you could end up harming a lot of stakeholders. And that in itself is an unethical thing to do, to harm other stakeholders really who have done nothing to merit being harmed in such a way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a video, but before I do that, I'll just move on a couple of slides over here, just give you another example of lack of ethics in project execution. And here I would like to give the example of the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008. Now, at the organizational level, the Beijing Olympic Games was a big success. It was very well organized, very large participation. Many hundreds of millions of people have watched it. And of course, for the host country, China, it brought a lot of global attention, also a lot of praise for the way the games were conducted. Okay. But from an ethical perspective, the games, which were also a project, organizing the Olympic Games is a project basically. From an ethical perspective, these Olympic Games in Beijing, they had a very ugly side to them, which really did not attract that much attention, or which it should have attracted. And this unethical actions which occurred, for example, were the violent ejection of scores of inhabitants of the poorer sections of Beijing and the demolition of their homes because they were considered unsightly, not nice looking, would give maybe not a nice reputation when foreign guests were coming to go roam around the city. So here is one very good example of unethical behavior in project execution. Another example which I have brought, lack of ethics in project execution, that relates to the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates, as you know, various cities there, Dubai has been very much in the global limelight for the last sort of 10, 15 years or so. All kinds of fancy buildings have been coming up there, kinds of fancy facilities, which a lot of people from Pakistan also like to go there and enjoy. But what most people do not realize, or really which has not been really sort of projected very much, is the conditions of the workers who have been making all these facilities and all these buildings, who have been constructing all these facilities and buildings. And there's been a lot of mistreatment of these construction workers, many of whom are from countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, and so forth, who have been working under very bad work situations. They have been living practically like animals in very small accommodations in cabins, where they had a shift system for the beds. The bed was used by one worker for 7-8 hours, left, and the next one took it, and then the next one took it after that. Very bad sanitation conditions, very hot over there, 50 degrees centigrade, and no proper sort of cooling systems for these people who are also, exposed to a lot of risk because they're working at a very high altitude. There has been some research done on this, for example, over here by the American NGO, Human Rights Watch. They have done a big study on this mistreatment of workers, of construction workers in the United Arab Emirates. The name of the study here is Building Towers, Cheating Workers, Exploitation of Migrant Construction Workers in the United Emirates. And if you click on the slide, it should take you directly to the document. It's a PDF file where you can get all the graphic details of how these workers, a very large number of them, have been very poorly treated in the United Arab Emirates, which is a very rich country, and which easily could have afforded to see that these people are treated properly, and which was reacting very angrily to these reports. So, yeah, that was it. Now, what I want to do is I would like to show you this video here. This video relates to what we have discussed in this lecture about ethics. This is also about lack of ethics, this time in project conception, project planning. The name of this video is Mine, from mining, and it is the story of a tribe which are living in India's Orissa state. These tribe, they have been living there for a long time on their mountains, which is very sacred to them. There is this company, which is a very large company in India. It's called Vedanta. And this Vedanta company wants to build a bauxite mine on the mountain where these people are living. The mine, the company says, yes, the mine is very good for the economy, it will bring benefits, it will bring jobs, etc., etc. The people say, the tribe which is living there, they say, no, we don't want it. We have been living like this for a long time, and we want to continue living like this. Now, this example here, this video, this is really symbolic for many such projects around the world, particularly in developing countries, countries in Asia, countries in Africa, countries in South America, where you have big companies, many of them from Western countries, where they want to come in and they want to start mining resources, whether these are mineral resources or whether these are energy resources, whatever. And there is often a clash with the locals who are living in those places, traditional people, traditional tribes, who say that they are not interested. They would like to continue living the way they have been living. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this video. What I want you to do is to watch it very closely. It's about 11 minutes long. It's not that much. Narrated by British actress Joanna Lumley, who's also an activist for people in developing countries, particularly here in South Asia. And what I want you to do now is to look at the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders here? And see or try to identify what are their different interests, which should be quite self-apparent, and then try to see how the interests are conflicting with each other. And you should also get to start thinking about what could be done to resolve this issue over here, how you would have gone about it. So let me now play this video, and then you can see and give us your comments.
One of India's most remote tribes. A mountain they revere as a god, and a multinational mining company with its sights set on the mountain's sacred stone. The stage is set for a bitter struggle against the backdrop of eastern India's dramatic landscapes. As the bulldozers draw closer, what will one tribe do to save their forest, their mountains, and their god? There's a place where rich forest shrouds the hillsides, where the summer's monsoon rains turn the streams into rivers, and the mountains are revered as gods. These are India's Niamgiri Hills, home to one of the subcontinent's most remote tribes, the Dongriya Khond. In the beginning, their mountain god created Niamgiri as a homeland for the Dongriya. And they say he's been watching over them ever since.
Amara Niamra hela Amar Devi ku ame puja koruchi. Pothore dongore sube puja koruchi. Goro gaha sube puja koruchi. Seta hela Amar Mundur, Amar Devi seta.
High on the hillsides, a family tends their garden.
Iko mati nambu, dore mati nambu, kuyang mati menambu, arka mati menambu, katingki nambu, junongki nambu, hayaki. Asa berai nutada. aka medainu berka medainu galati pak Erika Dorka berka maringa osa kasa haya medain mudeni nuni ge kortosa.
Dongria Khond men spend much of their time in the forest, collecting a different kind of harvest. They're gathering juice from the forest's giant palm trees. The palm juice is mildly alcoholic. It gives the men the energy they need to keep walking through the dense forest for hours on end.
Sabu, amar pahapur sabu bulichi, amar dongar dunguri, ebebi deke debi. Salpa gacho achi, salpa gachar pet puruchi, ame duma heuchi. Konda kodli tille, seta duma heuchi. Seta boot jiki kar ja.
But it's not the bananas or the sweet roots which are now attracting outsiders. The mountains are rich in bauxite, the raw material for aluminium, and it's this that's brought London-based mining company Vedanta Resources here. It plans a vast open-cast mine on the top of Nyamgiri, the Dongria Khan's most sacred site. Lodu is the leader of Lakpoda, a village that lies inside the area leased to Vedanta. He's taking survival researchers to the mine site in the forest above his village.
ए पहाड़ नेबा पाई बोले ए पत्थर सब नेबा पाई से एकु पानी चाहूचे पत्थर तिले का आमको पिला जिले का आमे बची पारबु डंगर पहाड़ सब बची पारबु वर्षा आसबो से पवन आसबो शीत आसबो सब तासबास हेबो ए पत्थर सब कु पानी नेले आमे मरि जीवु हमर आत्मा से जीवो एटा तो हमर नियमगिरी हमर आत्मा.
The company hopes that blasting the top of the mountain away will reveal 70 million tons of bauxite. Through the trees you can see Vedanta's aluminium refinery in neighbouring Lanjigar. These wide plains, far below Nyamgiri, are home to other neighbouring tribes, and Lodu sees their fate as a warning.
एबे लांजीगड़ टिके जाऊं तो आज्ञा से कुपानी केमती बसला से पेक्टर बसे देला से पालाण बसे देला केमती ताके हरान हे जाउची सेमती हरान हे करे से माने ओदे लोक सेमती बुड़ी सुड़ी सेमती मरि जाउची पिला जिला सेमती मरि जाय सेती पाई से बेदान कुपानी को से लांजीगड़ लोक से मानुची एबे जानी देला आगरे से आसु आसु से बेदान कुपानी बोलीतिला एबे केते ताके कुकुर गति हेउ नाही सेती पाई एबे से लांजीगड़ लोक एबे जानी देला से जमी बाड़ा नाही ने से ताको घर दुआर नाही ने सब से बेदान कुपानी सेमती घर दुआर बांधी करे सेमती रही जाउची लांजीगड़ जाऊंतु आज्ञा एबे टिके देखि जाऊंतु आपण.
Vedanta's refinery dominates the plains around Lanjigar. Its toxic waste is dumped into enormous pools and then seeps underground. You can even hear its hum from high in the Dongria Khan's forests. But Lanjigar wasn't always like this.
भल खाउथिलु भल पिउथिलु जंगलर किछि फलमूल जिनस भी खाउथिलु चाषबास भी ठीक होथिला.
Nowadays, nearly everything around Lanjigar has the word Vedanta written on it. But even talking about the company is something that makes some people here nervous.
मनगो आसीकिना कंपनी आसला आसीकिरी से कोइला जे जमीवार छाड़ो बापा टंका पैसा नियो
नहीं आम गाँ तो छाड़ी कर नहीं जाऊ बोली बहुत कांडा हेले तथापि ढलार गुंडा मैंने लाई कर जबरदस्ती रे सेटा पुलिस लाई कर से मन के उठेबार व्यवस्था कले भल्ली जो राति राति केते लोग आम घर छाड़ी कर गाँ छाड़ी कर नहीं जाऊ बोली करी जेते बेले कहला के जबरदस्ती राति राति बुल्ली जोर लगे करी घर माने बंगा
कंपनी जमी ई कंपनी रे जमी आमे हरई करी एते असुविधा हेउचु नाई कुइले सरी ने से पाला ठेला तन तो पानी फाके फाके सब बाटे पानी ने केने असुविधा नाही पानी कुओं मनरटा से जरन पानी से कुओर पानी जरन पानी तने भी से आसुची बॉक्साइड गुण सब पड़ुची आरी किछि असुविधा सुविधा असुविधा असुविधा का हे जाउची सुविधा केबे सुविधा नाही ने.
But alongside the pollution and the razor wire, there's something remarkable. Resistance.
बाकी थिला लोग के कहूची तमर एरिया के कंपनी आसीची भल भाव रे चलो आमे चलू नाही तु आमके चला नाही आमे जेन दादी ओजा काल रु जिंती चलुथिलु सेमती कर चलू एटा मारा धरा करवा ଚେଷ୍ଟା ଚାଲିଛି।
ଲୋକ ଏନ୍ତା ତପି ଗଲେନି ଯେ ଯେନ୍ ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥ କରିବି ବୋଲିକରି ଲୋକମାନେ ଦବିଥିଲେ ଏବେ ତ ସବୁ ସେ ନିୟମଗିରି ଯିବ ନା ପଛେ ଯିବ ଆମର ଜୀବନ ଆଗେ ଯିବା ବୋଲି।
Back in Niamgiri, the pressure is mounting. Roads are being bulldozed deep into the hills.
ବେଦାଙ୍ଗ ଆସିଲେ ତ ଆମ ମାନିବୁ ନାହିଁ। ଆଗ ନ ଜାଣିଥିଲି ସେ ବେଲେ କିଛି ନା ଆମେ କିଛି କରବେ କିଛି ନାହିଁ ବୋଲିକରି ସେ ଫ୍ୟାକ୍ଟ୍ରି ବନ୍ଦ ଦେଲେ। ଏବେ ଟିକେ ଜାଣିପାରିଲେ ଆମର ବୀରତ୍ୱ ଆସିଲେ ସେ ସରକାର ବୋଲିକି ମୁଁ ଜାଣିପାରିଲି। ଏବେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ମାନବାକୁ ଦରକାର ନାହିଁ। ଆମେ ବେଦାଙ୍ଗ ରାସ୍ତା ଆଣିବାକୁ ଦରକାର ନାହିଁ। ଆମର ନିୟମଗିରି ପାହାଡ଼ରେ ଆମକୁ ଗାଡ଼ି ନାହିଁ ଘୋଡ଼ା ନାହିଁ ଆମେ ସେଠି ଯିବୁ ନାହିଁ ଆମେ।
And so the Dongrias have blocked the roads into their sacred hills. They're not waiting for their fate to be decided in a corporate boardroom.
ବେଦାଙ୍ଗ ଆମର ନିୟମଗିରି ପାହାଡ଼ ଛୁଇଁବାକୁ ଦରକାର ନାହିଁ। ଆମର ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କ ଗଲେ ବି ମୁଣ୍ଡ ଗଲେ ବି ମୁଁ ଛାଡ଼ିବୁ ନାହିଁ। ସେ ପାରିଲେ ସରି ଆମେ ପାରିଲେ
ಅಂದ್ರೆ ತಾದ ಬುಡ ತಾಯಿ ಬಾಯಿ ನತ್ತಿರ ವೆಚ್ಚರಿಗುವೆನ ಆತೆರು ಸಾರಿ ಬೀಸ್ತಿನ ದೋಲೋ ನತ್ತಿರ ಹಬ್ಬೆ ಜನ ಎಕ್ಕೋಟ ಕತ್ತ ಕ್ಯಾನಂಗ ಮಾರೋ ದಾಬಿ ಕೀನು ಎತ್ಸೆ ಮಾ ಜೇಲ ಮನ್ ಬೇನೆ ಮಾ ರಾಜ್ಯತಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾರೋ ಮನ್ನು ಮಾ ದೇಶತಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾರೋ ತಿನ್ನು.
You stand down and try to breathe. The air will calm you down.
ମୁଇଁ ସେଟା ଦେବି ନାହିଁ ତ ଦେବି ନାହିଁ ତ କୁଆଡ଼େ ଗଲେ ବି ମୋତେ ଫାଶୀ କରଲେ କର ମରଲେ ମର ପୂଜଲେ ପୂଜ ଆମର ଆଗରେ ଥିଲା ସେମିତି ଏକା। ଏବେ ଆଗରେ କେମିତି ଥିଲା ସଣଗର ଥିଲୁ ଏବେ ବି ସଣଗର ଏକା ଥିଲୁ।
You can run away from me. Nothing's gonna change. You can hide yourself from me. I'll see you anyway.
ପିଲାକୁ ବାନ୍ଧିକିନା ନେଲେ ଯିବୁ ସେଠି ଗୋଟେ ଜଣ କେତେ ଖଣ୍ଡର ଲୋକ ଏତେ ଖଣ୍ଡର ଲୋକ କିଛି ଜଣ ବାନ୍ଧି ପାରିବେ କି? ପୁଲିସ ବାଲା କେତେ ଦିନ ରହିବି? ପୁଲିସ ବାଲା କେତେ ଦିନ ମୋତେ ବାନ୍ଧିକିନା ରଖିବେ? ଭାତ ଦେବେ ନା ମାସ ଦେବେ ନା? ମାସ ଖାଇକିନା ରହିବି ଭାତ ଖାଇକିନା ରହିବି। ଝିଅ ପିଲାକୁ ବାନ୍ଧିକିନା ନେଲେ ଯିବି କେତେ ଦିନ ରହ ବୋଇଲେ ସେଠି ରହିବି। ଆମର ଜୀବନ ନ ଛାଡ଼ି ନ ମରଲା ଯାଏ ଆମର ଧରତିକା ଆମର ନିୟମର ଯାକି ଛାଡ଼ିବି ନାହିଁ।
କେତେ ଆମର ଆଦିବାସୀ ହଉ କି ଆମର ଆଜ୍ଞା ମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଆମର ସାଇଡ଼ରେ ମିଶିବାର ପଡ଼ିବ। ବେଦାଙ୍କୁ କେତେବାର ପଡ଼ିବ।
You can run away from me. Nothing's gonna change. You can hide yourself from me. I'll see you anyway.
अरे familia को दाएं पे हम लोग की बुताने रो है ना तुम से हाँ हम ये कत्ती ना बोल नहीं कत्ती ना बोल।
Okay, so you've seen this video. It's quite interesting, well recorded. And there you should see now that there are a lot of ethical issues which are involved over here. On the one hand you have this company, and on the one hand you have this tribe, and you have seemingly irreconcilable positions. The company which really wants to build this bauxite mine, and the tribe which says no, you shouldn't. You know? This you will find in many cases around the world. This is just as I said previously before playing the video, this is symbolic. And this is now where stakeholder management and engagement has to come into play. If these people, for instance, cannot be convinced that this mine should be built, well then one has to see really whether this project should go ahead or not. Personally, I think it shouldn't, because the people have been living there for a long time, so they should have the right to decide whether or not a mine should come up in its place. So sometimes you have very irreconcilable positions. Sometimes you might have some sort of reconciliation. The two might be able to come to an agreement or a compromise, or maybe find some alternative way of developing the mine which would be acceptable to the tribe by using technology or by using innovative approaches. Anyway, this just to illustrate the ethical issues which can arise on projects. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sign off. We have talked, I think, enough about ethics in project stakeholder management and engagement. Extremely important subject, and something you always must be mindful of when later on you will be working on projects and you will be interacting with stakeholders. Always try to be ethical in your approach to dealing with them. So that's it now for this lecture, and I'll see you again in the next lecture, which will be lecture number 6. Thank you very much.